In the heart of Ireland, where the veils of mist curl over lakes like the tender breath of sleeping lovers, there exists a space where the edges of dream and waking life dissolve. Twilight lingers here longer than anywhere else, a soft intoxication that deepens the air with hues of violet and silver. In this threshold world, one begins to sense that longing itself is alive, wandering through reeds and rippling waters, calling out with voices only the soul can hear. It is here, amid the dream-breathing land, that the story of Angus, the god of love and vision, begins to unfurl. A story not merely told, but sighed into the ear of night, like a secret too fragile for the noise of day. Ireland was, and still is, a land that understands yearning. The hills cradle silence, but within that silence lies pulse, anticipation, the faint vibration of what might come. The lakes are mirrors, not only of the sky, but of the heart, reflecting both what is seen and what is sought. The rivers do not simply carry water, they carry desire, flowing endlessly toward the unknown. It is no wonder, then, that in such a land, love is not just an emotion, but a presence that moves through stones, trees, and stars, binding everything together with invisible threads. Within this enchanted landscape, Angus is born, radiant, beautiful, youthful forever, but restless. He is the dreamer of the gods, the whisperer of visions that arrive in the darkness when the body lies vulnerable and open to wonder. Yet even one such as he, wrapped in divine grace, is not immune to the pull of longing. His story begins as all human stories of love begin, not with possession, not with triumph, but with absence, with a shadow, a face glimpsed in the mind but not in the flesh. Dreams are delicate things, and yet they carry the weight of mountains. They can shatter us, reshape us, lead us into madness or salvation. In the case of Angus, they would do both, for in his sleep came a vision more intoxicating than wine, more dangerous than fire. Each night, as he drifted into slumber, there appeared to him a maiden whose beauty was like no other, whose presence set his heart to trembling and his soul to flight. She was not merely a woman, not merely a shape conjured by imagination. She was a calling, a destiny, woven into the fabric of twilight itself. Her name was not yet known to him, but her presence filled him as though she had always belonged. Her hair was black as the raven's wing, yet shining with the softness of moonlight. Her eyes carried the mystery of deep waters, those that invite you to lean closer, yet promise no return if you fall within. Around her drifted an air of wildness, like the wind rushing through reeds, like wings brushing against the silence of dusk. She was both close and far, both lover and enigma. Anguenus would awaken each morning aching, the image of her lingering like a scent that refuses to fade. His body longed for her, but more deeply still, his spirit hungered, thirsted, demanded her presence. The gods around him spoke of battles, of feasts, of kingdoms rising and falling,
But Anganus was lost in a fever that could not be explained to those who had never known such yearning. He began to fade, as though life itself were leaking from him with every dream that did not become reality. And yet he could not abandon her, for longing has its own power. It is a fire that consumes, but also a fire that illuminates. It teaches us that desire is not weakness, but proof that something greater awaits. In this story, desire becomes destiny, for without it, Anginus would never have sought beyond the borders of his world, never stepped into the mists of the other world to find what his heart demanded. Ireland itself seemed to conspire with his hunger. The land whispered of her. The lakes rippled with her name, though he had not yet learned it. Each twilight, when the veil grew thin and shadows stretched long, he would feel her near, like the brush of fingers just beyond reach. His dreams were no longer mere dreams, they were messages, and he knew, with the certainty that comes only to those in love, that she was real. What does it mean to fall in love with a dream? For mortals, it is torment, a reminder that perfection belongs to imagination. For Anganus, it was a command, a divine insistence that the dream was a gateway to truth. Love, after all, is not bound by flesh alone. It belongs to the soul, and the soul recognizes what the eyes have not yet seen. Thus begins the tale of Anganus and Caer Ibormith, not with triumph or union, but with the aching sweetness of yearning. It is a story that whispers to us still, across centuries, because each heart knows what it means to desire what feels unattainable. We are drawn into it not because Anganus is divine, but because his hunger is utterly human. We too have dreamed of a face, a voice, a presence we cannot hold, and we too have felt our lives tilt toward that vision, powerless to resist.
The mists of Ireland hold many secrets, but perhaps their greatest gift is this: they blur the line between what is and what might be, between reality and desire. Iongus lived in that blur, caught between worlds, straining toward a love that shimmered just out of reach. And it is there, in that shimmering space, that his destiny and hers would be written. The theme of this myth is not conquest, nor victory, nor even possession. It is the haunting truth that dreams shape us, that longing can bend the path of gods and mortals alike. It is about the power of desire to carve rivers through stone, to set stars in motion, to whisper destinies into being. To long for someone, truly long, is to call them into existence, to weave them from the substance of dreams into the fabric of life. Aeongus's longing was not a quiet ache, it was a tempest, a hunger that made every breath a plea, every moment an eternity of absence. He would not eat, he would not speak, he would not rest until he found her. This is how powerful desire becomes when it touches both body and spirit. It unravels everything else, reducing the world to a single burning point of focus. And yet, within this suffering, there is sensual sweetness, for longing itself is intoxicating.
To yearn is to be alive in every nerve, every heartbeat, to feel the body and soul awakened to a sharpness beyond ordinary living. Aeongus dwelled in this intoxication, and through him we are invited into it as well. His fevered dreams are not just his own, they are ours, echoing in us as we listen to his story, awakening memories of our own unreachable loves, our own shadows of desire. So linger now in the mists of Ireland. Listen to the waters, to the twilight hush, to the tremble of wings overhead. For the story of Aeongus and Caer Ibormith has begun, not with fulfillment, but with longing. And in that longing lies the seed of everything to come: passion, pursuit, transformation, union, and the reflection that love, like twilight, is most beautiful in its in-betweenness, in the moment when night kisses day and dreams kiss waking life. This is not merely the introduction to their myth, it is an invitation to step into longing, to surrender to its sweetness, to let it pull you as it pulled Aeongus into the mists where destiny awaits.
Aengus was unlike any of the other gods who roamed the green halls of Ireland's mythic memory. Though immortal, he bore the eternal bloom of youth, a face untouched by time, a body that seemed carved from both light and music. His presence carried the warmth of dawn, and yet there was always in his eyes a trace of twilight, as though he lingered at the edge of two worlds, half in waking, half in dream. He was beloved not only for his beauty, which could stir desire in any who beheld him, but also for his voice, a low and melodic current that seemed to flow straight into the heart. The poets whispered that Aengus was the god of longing itself, not merely of love. His powers were woven into the fabric of dreams, and it was said he could enter the sleep of mortals, gifting them visions so intoxicating that they would awaken in tears, and never knowing if they had glimpsed a god, a lover, or the deeper self they had hidden away. Yet despite all this radiance, Aengus himself was not spared from the ache he so easily evoked in others. If anything, he carried more of it. For what use is the power to create dreams if the heart that wields it lies unsatisfied? Those who saw him from afar would describe him as restless, as though his steps could not settle into the ground, as if he was always listening for a voice just out of reach. His laughter was bright but fleeting, his gaze tender but distracted. He was adored by many, yet bound to none, and so it was that his beauty, instead of anchoring him, only magnified his loneliness. Desire clung to him, but fulfillment eluded him. He was radiant, but in that radiance flickered the shadow of hunger. It was into this hunger that Caer Ibormith entered, not in flesh, not at first, but in the subtle realm of dream. Her image descended upon him not with the sudden blaze of lightning, but with the soft persistence of moonlight that seeps through every crack, no matter how tightly shutters are drawn. Night after night she came, until she was no longer a dream, but a presence more solid than waking reality itself.
Caer was unlike any maiden, goddess or spirit Aengus had ever known.
She was shaped not from the permanence of stone or the golden glow of the sun, but from water, wing, and shadow. Her beauty did not dazzle with force, it entranced with quiet inevitability. Her hair fell in dark waves, black as a raven in flight, yet it shimmered when touched by light as though woven with secret stars. Her eyes carried mystery, deep as hidden pools, their glances both invitation and warning. To look into them was to feel the pull of surrender, the dizzying promise that once entered, one might never return unchanged. Care was more than a woman. She was the embodiment of what slips through the fingers just as one tries to grasp it. She was desire personified, elusive, fleeting, the sweetness that vanishes even as it touches the lips. Unlike the other maidens of myth who belonged to lands, rivers, or kingdoms, Care belonged to the liminal. She was a swan maiden, bound to a cycle of enchantment that tied her to both human form and the freedom of the wild. By day she might soar over still waters, white wings flashing against the sky. By night she might walk the world in beauty that drew every gaze, but offered her heart to none. This duality defined her. She was tender yet untouchable, near yet impossibly distant. In her presence lingered the intoxication of what could be but never fully was. And it was this quality, this perpetual shimmer between approach and retreat, that made her irresistible. For what is more haunting than beauty that promises love, yet remains just beyond reach? The contrast between Angus and Care was stark, almost cruel in its clarity. He was a god, radiant and full of power, yet burdened by emptiness. She was a dream, fragile yet enduring, born of enchantment and bound to cycles of appearance and vanishing. He embodied abundance, she embodied absence. He longed for permanence, she thrived in fleetingness. It was this contrast that turned their encounter from mere attraction into destiny. For Angus, Care was not simply beautiful, she was necessary. She carried in her being the answer to his restlessness, the bone to his hunger. Each glimpse of her in his dreams tightened the grip of desire until it became indistinguishable from need. To be without her was to be incomplete, as though his godhood meant nothing if she did not stand beside him.
For Care, Angus was both temptation and peril. She was bound to her enchantment, her life woven into cycles that no mortal or god could easily undo. To give herself to him would mean surrendering the freedom of distance, the mystery of absence. Yet there was something in his yearning that reached her, something that whispered across the veil between them. For who can resist being seen so completely, desired so absolutely, that one's very existence feels like destiny? Their connection was not balanced, it was charged, fraught, trembling. Angus, with all his divine power, could not command her presence, and this unmoored him. Care, with all her elusive beauty, could not remain untouched by his longing, and this unsettled her. They were bound not by possession, but by the tension between pursuit and retreat, a dance of distance and closeness, like waves rolling toward and away from the shore. It is in this contrast that their myth finds its sensual depth. Angus is the embodiment of passion, direct, consuming, unyielding in his hunger. Care is the embodiment of distance, of the dream that dissolves when morning comes, of the touch that lingers in memory but fades from the skin. Together they form the eternal equation of desire, one who longs without end and one who can never be fully claimed. Yet in this fragile opposition lies their allure. If care had been easily won, Angus's hunger might have cooled. If Angus had not been consumed, care might have drifted untouched. But between them something greater sparked, the truth that love is not about having, but about becoming. Angus would need to change, to step beyond the comfort of godhood, to risk losing himself to reach her. Care would need to allow the possibility of union, to surrender some of her distance for the first time. The presentation of these two figures is not merely an introduction to characters, but to forces. Angus is the fire that consumes. Care is the water that recedes. Angus is dreamer turned seeker. Care is dream made flesh and feather. He represents pursuit. She represents retreat. But together they form the eternal rhythm that has shaped countless tales of love, the ache between wanting and having, the trembling distance between two hearts destined to change one another. Thus the stage is set. On one side, a god whose beauty and charm cannot soothe the emptiness of his heart. On the other, a swan maiden whose elusiveness makes her the embodiment of all that slips through mortal grasp. In their meeting lies not just romance, but a meditation on the nature of longing itself, that what we desire most is often what we cannot hold, and that the act of pursuit transforms us as much as the union we seek. And so we come to know them, not as symbols, but as presences alive with sensual possibility. Angus, radiant yet restless. Care, elusive yet irresistible. Together, they are not merely lovers waiting to unite. They are the dance of passion and distance, the fire and the feather, the god who yearns and the dream who beckons. Their contrasts are not obstacles. They are the very reason their story matters, the very reason it still stirs hearts across centuries. For in them we recognize the eternal truth that desire lives in tension, that longing is most powerful when it reaches for what seems just out of reach.
From the moment care appeared to him in the shifting glow of dreams, Angus ceased to belong fully to himself. Her presence lingered beyond sleep, following him into daylight like a fragrance that could not be washed from the skin. Every hour without her became a wound, every breath a reminder of absence. Gods are not meant to wither, but Angus, the radiant, the ever-youthful, began to fade. He no longer ate, no longer drank, no longer joined the revels of his kin. What joy is there in wine, when the lips you thirst for are only shadows? What sweetness is there in music, when the song you crave is the echo of wings in dreams? Those who looked upon him saw the change. His cheeks lost their flush, his laughter, once golden, thinned into silence. His eyes, bright as dawn, dulled with sleepless nights. Concern turned to whispers that the god of love was dying of love itself, that he who could stir passion in all others was consumed by his own. Yet none could reach him, for his hunger was beyond the remedies of feast or counsel. His heart had chosen, and nothing less than care would soothe its torment. Desire is often painted as sweetness, but in truth it is a fever. It burns, it unsettles, it transforms the body into a vessel of yearning. For Angus, every moment without her was a flame pressing against his ribs, a tide pulling him further from shore. At night he surrendered to her presence, helpless before the visions that came unbidden. By day the loss was unbearable, and he drifted through the halls of his father's house like a ghost. At last he could endure no more. The dreams were not simply dreams, they were a call. He felt it deep in his bones, as if the earth itself were whispering, "She is real, she waits, seek her." And so, restless, trembling, desperate, Angus set out upon a journey that would pull him across rivers, lakes, and realms unseen by mortal eyes. He could not remain still when desire drove him like a relentless wind. His first steps led him to the waters of Ireland, for Care's presence had always been tied to lakes and flowing currents in his visions. The rivers gleamed under twilight as though mocking him, each ripple like the flutter of a swan's wing just out of reach. He wandered their banks, calling her name, though he did not yet know it. He searched every reed, every shadow where water met land. At times he swore he saw her shape, white against the mist, only for it to dissolve into nothingness when he reached out. The torment of pursuit became its own intoxication, each glimpse sharpening the hunger, each failure deepening the ache.
Angus sought guidance from those who knew the veils between worlds, the druids, the keepers of mystery, the spirits who danced at the edge of human sight. Some pitied him, others laughed, but all acknowledged the truth. A dream this persistent could not be illusion. They spoke of a maiden bound by enchantment, one who belonged not fully to this world, but to the other world that hovered beside it like a shadow. She could be found, they said, but only by one who would surrender himself entirely to the search. So Angus surrendered. He left behind his feasts, his halls, his companions. He walked until his feet bled, sailed until his arms shook, rode until his body trembled. Yet even his divine form felt frail against the immensity of his desire. The hunger hollowed him, stripped him bare, until only the need for her remained. He was no longer a god among gods, but a man undone by love, fevered, delirious, moved only by the fire that consumed his chest. Each night, when exhaustion overtook him, she returned, always in the same way. Her dark hair, her swan-like grace, her eyes deep with mystery. She never spoke, yet her silence was a language more powerful than any word. Her presence both healed and wounded. Healed because it gave him a taste of union. Wounded because the dream dissolved each dawn, leaving only emptiness in its place. The torment grew unbearable. To dream of her was bliss, but to awaken was agony. The sweetness of night sharpened the bitterness of day. Angus began to dread the mornings, those hours when light would break apart the fragile world where he could still hold her. Desire had become suffering, yet he clung to it, for to lose the dream would mean to lose her entirely. And so he welcomed the fever, welcomed the pain, for within it lay the only proof of her existence. But desire does not remain still, it demands movement. Angus could not merely dream and ache. His longing turned to pursuit, and his pursuit turned to obsession. He scoured lakes that mirrored the sky, places where swans gathered at twilight. He followed rumors of maidens who vanished at dawn, of shadows that lingered upon water long after the figure had disappeared. He spoke with spirits of the air, who teased him with riddles. He questioned the keepers of lore, who told him of swan maidens who shed their feathers to walk the earth in beauty before returning to the skies. Each tale was another arrow in his heart, reminding him that she was real, that he must continue.
As days blurred into weeks, weeks into months, his body withered, but his fire only grew. The gods who watched him pitied him, but none could intervene. For what force, divine or mortal, can unbind the grip of desire once it has taken root in the soul? Angus himself scarcely resembled the radiant youth he had once been. His cheeks were hollow, his gaze haunted, yet within his eyes burned a light fiercer than ever before. The hunger had stripped him of vanity, of comfort, of distraction. Only Caer remained. And so the god of love became the servant of love. He was consumed, undone, remade into a vessel of yearning. He no longer belonged to his kin or to himself. He belonged to the dream that ruled his every breath. In this torment lies the essence of desire, not gentle, not easy, but relentless, a storm that reshapes the landscape of the heart. For desire is not satisfied with balance. It consumes, it insists, it demands transformation. As Angus journeyed farther, his suffering deepened into something almost sacred. Hunger became devotion, pain became offering. Each night he surrendered to her presence as though kneeling at an altar. Each day he rose again to chase what he could not hold. His pursuit was not rational, not chosen. It was inevitable as rivers flowing to the sea, as inevitable as twilight falling each day across the land. This was the conflict that defined him. Not war with another, not rivalry with gods, but the battle within himself. between the fire of his longing and the absence that consumed him. And yet it was no ordinary conflict, for though it brought him close to ruin, it also carved him into something greater. His torment revealed the depth of his passion, the intensity of his spirit. In his hunger, he was transformed from a youthful god into a figure of myth, one whose longing would echo across centuries. Thus the story unfolds, not as a gentle romance, but as a fevered pursuit, a sensual hunger that burns through every veil. To long for Caer is to ache beyond endurance, to suffer with sweetness, to be broken and remade by the vision of love just out of reach. Angus lived this truth, and in doing so, he revealed it for us all, that desire, when denied, becomes torment, but in that torment lies the seed of destiny. The day came when longing, which had tormented Angus into near dissolution, finally opened into revelation. After endless nights of dreams and endless days of fruitless search, the fever that consumed him brought him to the edge of a lake shrouded in twilight mist. The air trembled with stillness, as though every reed, every ripple of water held its breath. Here the veil between worlds thinned, and the ache in Angus's chest sharpened into certainty. He knew, without needing to be told, that this was the place where dream and reality would finally meet. The lake stretched wide, silver as polished glass, its surface broken only by the gliding forms of swans. They circled in silence, wings brushing the air with a sound like whispered secrets. White feathers shimmered against the dimming sky, each bird an apparition of purity, grace, and distance. Yet among them was one whose presence struck him like a chord vibrating through every fiber of his being. Even before his eyes could distinguish her shape, his soul recognized her. Caer Ebormeith. She was there, not a dream, not a shadow, but real, breathing, alive. Her swan form glided across the water with effortless majesty, feathers gleaming like pale fire. The sight of her pierced Angus, flooding him with relief so fierce it was indistinguishable from pain. His heart leapt as though it had finally been returned to his chest after a long exile. He had found her. And yet, even as the realization filled him, he understood the truth that nearly broke him anew. She was not his to claim. She was bound by enchantment, her being caught between two forms, two worlds. To reach her, he could not stand as he was. For a moment, he stood at the shore, trembling. The god of love, radiant and eternal, felt stripped of power before the fragile grace of a swan. His beauty, his voice, his dreams, none could bridge the distance between them. To remain as Angus was to remain apart. Desire had led him here, but desire alone would not complete the journey. Only surrender could.
He closed his eyes, breathed in the air heavy with twilight, and let go. He shed the trappings of his divinity, released the eternal bloom of youth that clothed him,
and allowed the enchantment of the lake to take him. His body shivered, dissolved, reshaped. The sound of rushing wings filled his ears, and when he opened his eyes again, feathers gleamed along his skin. His arms were no longer arms, but wings, strong and white, glistening with dew. He had become what she was, a swan, bound to the sky, the water, the rhythm of flight. The moment of transformation was both agony and ecstasy. Agony, for it stripped him of what he had always been, unmaking the God he had known. Ecstasy, for it brought him into union with the form that would allow him to reach her. It was surrender, the ultimate gesture of love, to give up everything, even divinity, to embrace the beloved as an equal. As he took to the air, his wings beat against the twilight, each motion heavy with desire, each glide filled with yearning. He flew toward her, and she turned, her dark eyes widening in recognition. Though she remained bound, her gaze told him she knew him, that the God who had sought her so feverishly was now before her, feathered and radiant, transformed by love. They circled each other above the lake, a dance older than words. Wings brushed wings, feathers stirred feathers, and the air thickened with a sensual electricity. The silence of the twilight was broken only by the soft rustle of their movements, the quickening beat of hearts that had longed across dreams and distance. In that moment, they were no longer separate figures, but two currents of the same river, two notes of the same song.
When they descended to the water, their bodies touched, not flesh to flesh, but feather to feather, soul to soul. The lake embraced them, cool and vast, as they glided side by side. Every motion was a caress, every ripple a sigh. Angus, who had suffered so long in absence, now drowned in presence, in the overwhelming sweetness of being near her. The torment of longing gave way to the intoxication of union, and yet even in this ecstasy lingered fragility, the knowledge that it might slip away. Their bodies moved together, as if choreographed by desire itself. He leaned into her, wings grazing hers, his head arching close to her dark feathered crown. She answered with her own movements, circling him, pressing close, retreating only to return again. It was a dance of hunger and surrender, a sensual weaving of selves that transcended form. To watch them was to see not swans, not a god and a maiden, but the essence of desire itself, yearning becoming touch, dream becoming reality. In her eyes, Angus saw not just beauty, but recognition. She had been waiting too, bound within the cycles of enchantment, longing for the one who could find her, reach her, risk everything for her. Their souls spoke in silence, a language older than any tongue, a communion that was both physical and transcendent. The merging of bodies was not confined to flesh. It was the merging of flight, of breath, of song. Together they raised their voices, and from their throats poured a sound so pure, so aching, that it carried across the lake and into the world beyond. Their song was a weaving of sorrow and sweetness, of torment endured and ecstasy found. Those who heard it later would say it was the most beautiful sound ever to grace the air, a melody that could heal the broken, soften the hard, and remind every heart of its own hidden hunger.
This was their climax. Not conquest, not possession, but surrender and union. Angus had given up his divine form, and in that giving, he had gained everything. Caer had opened herself to him, and in that opening, she too was transformed. Their love was not bound by flesh, but by spirit, not by dominance, but by equality. Each had risked, each had yielded, and together they had found the sweetness that lay beyond torment. The twilight deepened as they glided, the mist wrapping them in a shroud of intimacy. To the world, they were swans on a silver lake. To themselves, they were lovers who had transcended the barriers of dream and waking, of God and enchantment. Every motion was sensual, every touch a revelation. They had become not just two beings, but one rhythm, one pulse, one breath of desire given form. For Angus, this was the fulfillment of the hunger that had consumed him. For Caer, this was the answer to her own unspoken longing. Together, they revealed the truth that love is not about power or possession, but about surrender, transformation, and the merging of souls into something greater than either could be alone. The lake held them, the sky crowned them, and the mist bore witness as dream became reality. In that moment, the torment of desire was transfigured into the ecstasy of union.
The twilight deepened into a violet hush, the sky arching vast and tender above the silvered waters of the lake. From its mirrored surface, two swans lifted, wings beating in harmony, scattering droplets of moonlit water into the dusk. Angus and Caer rose together, their flight a miracle of symmetry, each motion a reflection of the other. To the watching reeds, to the silent stones, it seemed as if two souls had abandoned the heaviness of the earth and taken to the air as one. They circled the lake, their bodies gliding through the mists, carving paths of light into the evening air. With each sweep of their wings, the enchantment of their love spilled outward. A song poured from their throats, a haunting, wordless melody that shimmered with sorrow and sweetness. The sound rose above the waters and traveled beyond the shore, carrying to the ears of all who lingered nearby. Shepherds paused in the fields, entranced. Maidens gathering herbs let their baskets slip from their hands, weeping without knowing why. Even the wild creatures stilled. Deer froze mid-step, foxes lay down in silence, and the wind itself seemed to soften, as though afraid to break the fragile beauty of that song. It was said later that those who heard it were never the same. The melody awakened the memory of every longing, every hunger, every moment when desire had once ached within them. It reminded them of what it was to love with abandon, to risk everything for a fleeting touch, a stolen moment, a fragile union. And yet it was not a song of despair.
for within its notes lingered fulfillment, a sweetness that whispered of love found at last. The song carried both ache and balm, wound and healing, torment and release. Angus and Care felt this power even as they created it, their voices braided into one, rising, falling, trembling like the breath of the world itself. In flight, they became a vision of eternal love, of devotion that had triumphed over distance, enchantment, and despair. Yet within the triumph was fragility. They were swans now, their love made possible only by surrender and transformation. Angus had given up the certainty of his godhood to meet Care, and though he had found her, he knew how delicate their union remained.
For love is not iron, unbreakable and rigid. It is mist, shimmering and elusive, beautiful precisely because it may vanish at the breath of dawn. Their togetherness felt eternal in that moment, yet eternity trembled, threaded with dreamlike impermanence. To soar beside her, to feel her feathers brushing his in flight, was to touch infinity, but also to sense how easily such a miracle could slip away. Still, the fragility of their union did not lessen its power. It heightened it. Each circle around the lake, each beat of their wings was cherished as if it might be the last. Each note of their song trembled with both joy and sorrow, with the awareness that love, no matter how divine, is never free of risk. They had achieved union, but only through surrender, metamorphosis, and sacrifice. That knowledge deepened the sweetness, turning every instant into a treasure beyond measure. As they soared, the moon rose, casting its argent light upon the lake, transforming the surface into a sheet of silver flame. Their white bodies gleamed against the darkness, luminous and ghost-like, as though they were creatures made not of flesh or feather, but of starlight. To the mortal eyes that gazed from afar, they appeared as a vision, a dream gifted by the gods. Few would ever know that what they witnessed was no vision at all, but the fulfillment of a desperate love, a god's surrender, a maiden's freedom. For Care, the flight was a release long awaited. For years she had been bound by the cycles of enchantment, her form shifting with the seasons, her freedom tethered to forces she could not control. Yet now, as she circled the lake beside Angus, she felt the burden lift. His transformation had not only brought him to her, it had untangled the web that held her. In his surrender, he had given her more than love. He had given her freedom. For Angus, the flight was both triumph and lesson. He, the god of dreams and love, who had been sought by countless hearts, had learned what it meant to hunger, to ache, to be powerless before longing. Now, soaring beside Care, he tasted what it meant to receive the fulfillment of that hunger. Yet he also understood. It was not possession that mattered, but the fragile, fleeting miracle of presence. Love was not about claiming, but about becoming vulnerable, becoming equal, becoming something other than what one had been.
Their flight was endless and brief, timeless and fragile, eternal and fleeting. Around and around the lake they went, weaving circles of enchantment into the air. Their song lingered, filling the night with its haunting, tender power. And as the stars emerged, pricking the dark sky with their silver points, it seemed as if the heavens themselves bent closer to listen. The world would remember this union, whispered through generations. They would say that Angus and Care became swans forever, gliding together across the skies of Ireland, their voices rising in song whenever the mists thickened and the moon lit the waters. Others would say that they returned sometimes to human form, walking the earth hand in hand, their beauty so radiant that no mortal could mistake them for anything less than divine. But always, always the stories agreed they were together, their love enduring, not in spite of fragility, but because of it. Love had been achieved, not by force, not by command, not by divine decree, but through surrender, metamorphosis, and risk. It had required Angus to relinquish what he was, to risk dissolving into a form not his own, to place everything upon the fragile hope that she would know him, recognize him, accept him. And Care, in turn, had risked opening her heart to him, meeting him not as a god who demanded, but as a lover who had chosen to become her equal. Together, they revealed the truth that love is never safe, never certain, never free from risk. But it is precisely in that risk, that vulnerability, that it becomes more than a fleeting desire. It becomes destiny.
Their outcome was not a neat conclusion, not a tale tied with certainty. It was an unfolding, a continuation, a reminder that love is always alive, always trembling, always one breath away from loss. And yet, because of that, it is all the more precious. The fragility of their union did not diminish its strength, it illuminated it, as a candle flame glows brighter for being surrounded by darkness. So they flew, swans bound by song and soul, circling the lake that had witnessed their union. Their love was written not in stone, but in water, not fixed, but flowing, not eternal in the sense of permanence, but eternal in the sense of return, always recurring, always renewing, always shimmering at the edge of dream. Those who looked upon them whispered prayers, not of envy, but of reverence. For in Angus and Care they saw the reflection of their own longings, the ache that lived in every human heart, to love and be loved, to risk and be received, to find union not in dominance, but in surrender. Their story did not promise certainty, it promised something deeper, the chance to taste eternity in a single fragile moment, the chance to hold infinity within the fleeting touch of wings. Thus, their outcome was not an ending, but a revelation. To love is to risk. To risk is to surrender. To surrender is to be transformed. And in transformation lies the miracle of union. Fragile, shimmering, eternal in its impermanence. And so Angus and Care, god and swan maiden, dreamer and dream, circled the lake together, their wings carving the twilight, their song enchanting the world. Love had been achieved, and though it trembled like mist upon the water, it was no less true,
no less powerful, no less eternal.
Desire is a paradox. It is the fire that both warms and burns, the hunger that both sustains and consumes. In the tale of Angus and Caer Ibormith, this duality shimmers like moonlight on water. His longing tormented him, stripping away sleep, appetite, and peace. Yet that very torment gave birth to his transformation. It was the wound that forced him to seek, the ache that carried him across rivers and through veils of mist until at last he found her. Without the suffering of desire, there would have been no union. Without the agony, no ecstasy. So it is with us all. Desire is the cruelest of teachers, but also the most necessary. It pierces us, unsettles us, unravels the safe certainties we cling to, and yet in that unraveling, it shows us who we are willing to become, what we are willing to risk, and how much of ourselves we are willing to surrender. Angus, the radiant god of youth and love, learned this truth in his own flesh. He who had once been adored and unshaken by longing discovered what it meant to ache, to be undone by the image of a beloved always just out of reach. That ache destroyed him, but it also remade him. Caer, too, embodies this duality. As the Swan Maiden, she is the essence of fleeting desire, beautiful, untouchable, glimpsed only in dreams, bound to cycles beyond her control. To yearn for her is to yearn for what is elusive, what slips like mist through the hands, and yet in surrendering to her enchantment, Angus did not lose her. He found her. What was fragile, distant, and fleeting became, for a moment, tangible and real. Their story is not one of conquest, but of transformation. Love, it teaches us, is not about possession, about seizing and holding forever. It is about metamorphosis. To love deeply is to risk changing yourself, sometimes so completely that you are no longer who you once were. Angus gave up his godhood for feathers, wings, and song, and in doing so, he did not diminish himself. He expanded, becoming something he had never imagined. Caer, too, once imprisoned by enchantment, found freedom not through force, but through the surrender of another's pride. Love here is not a cage, but a liberation, a fragile, fleeting, luminous release.
And yet, even in this release, impermanence lingers. Their flight across the lake is eternal only in story, only in memory. For love, even when attained, is never fixed. It lives in the trembling of each moment, in the fragile beauty of wings brushing together above water. It lives in song that fades into silence, even as it enchants the world. To love is to accept that nothing endures unchanged, that every kiss carries within it the shadow of parting, every embrace the whisper of loss. But it is precisely that shadow which gives love its radiance. The tale of Angus and Caer leaves us not with certainty, but
with longing. It does not promise that love will always last, or that longing will always be satisfied. Instead, it reminds us that the pursuit itself, the willingness to risk, to surrender, to transform, is the very essence of love. The dream is never fully possessed, but in chasing it, in touching it for a heartbeat, we discover the deepest truths of ourselves. Perhaps that is why their story has endured through centuries, whispered by poets, carried in song. It speaks to a hunger older than time, the hunger that makes us human, to find in another not just comfort but transcendence, to be lifted beyond the boundaries of self, beyond the walls of safety, into a realm where we are remade. It is a hunger that can wound us, and yet we return to it again and again, because without it, life is pale, unlit, unfulfilled. To meditate on their union is to meditate on our own hearts. How many times have we dreamed of something just out of reach? How many times have we chased what dissolves as we approach? And how many times has that chase, futile though it seemed, shaped us into something new, braver, softer, truer? Love is not a prize at the end of a path. It is the path itself, winding, uncertain, filled with both thorns and blossoms.
We are left with an image. Two swans circling a lake under the twilight sky, their bodies gliding together, their song breaking open the silence of night. That image stays, shimmering at the edges of the mind, because it captures what we long for yet cannot hold. Their union is eternal because it is fragile. Their eternity is not measured in endless days, but in the depth of a single moment, lived fully, embraced completely, sung with every fiber of being. In the twilight of Ireland's misty lakes, in the haunting cries of swans gliding across water, we glimpse this truth. Love is both torment and nourishment, both wound and balm. It asks us to surrender, to risk, to accept fragility. And in that surrender, that risk, that acceptance, we find not certainty, but something greater. The fleeting taste of eternity, shimmering just long enough to remind us what it means to live. Angus and Care, circling the lake in their eternal flight, are not only lovers of legend. They are mirrors held up to every soul that has ever yearned. They are reminders that love is not about holding, but about becoming. Not about grasping forever, but about surrendering to the moment. Their story does not give us closure. It gives us longing. A longing we carry into our own lives, our own dreams, our own fragile unions. And so, as the tale fades, as the swans vanish into mist, we are left with that lingering ache, both sweet and sorrowful. The ache of knowing that love is always a dream we chase, sometimes touching, never fully possessing. But in the chase, in the dream,
In the surrender, we are transformed. That is the gift of their story. Not certainty, not permanence, but longing itself. Longing that torments and nourishes, destroys and creates, wounds and heals. Longing that makes us more than we were, that carries us into the air on trembling wings, that teaches us to sing even when we know the song will fade. And perhaps that is the deepest mystery of all, that the beauty of love lies not in its permanence, but in its impermanence. It is fragile, fleeting, impossible to hold forever, and yet for that very reason it shines all the brighter. Angus and Keir remind us that to love is to risk everything, to step into the unknown, to shed the safety of who we are in order to become what we might be. To love is to leap into the mist, not knowing whether the dream will dissolve or endure. And still we leap, still we chase, still we risk, because in that leap lies the essence of being alive. The myth closes, yet it does not end. It lingers in the hush after the song, in the ripples fading across the lake, in the beating of our own hearts as we listen. For every listener, every dreamer, every lover carries a piece of that twilight within them, the memory of swans in flight, the shimmer of desire, the fragile eternity of a love that can never fully be possessed, yet is more real for being so elusive. In the end, Angus and Keir do not vanish. They remain, circling, singing, reminding. Their wings are in every dream we chase, their song in every longing we carry, and in that reminder we too are transformed. Love is a fleeting dream, fragile as mist, eternal as desire.